Welcome to Zero Trust Journey. I am your host, Victor Monga, and today we are going to talk about zero trust, what we understand, what we hear. With me today, I have my good friend and a guest here at the podcast, Jay Mar-Tang. He's a field CISO at Pantera. Jay is based out of SoCal. Hey, we love our SoCal people. So, Jay, welcome to the show, man. Thank you for accepting my invitation.
Victor, of course, it's a privilege to be here. Thank you so much for having me on.
Of course. All right. Before we jump into the serious conversations of zero trust, let's start with a lighter note. I love coffee. People know it. At least people who know me, they know it. I need to drink almost every other hour a cup of coffee. Jay, what's your take on what keeps you going, man?
Oh, it's definitely caffeine. It really all depends on what the day looks like. So being here on the West Coast and working with overseas teams, I'm sure you can appreciate we have to get up pretty early. So I will usually start with at least a double espresso,
Nice.
sometimes a triple, and I'll always have one in the afternoon before I go to work out. This morning my call started at 6 though, so on
Ooh,
days that I start really early, I'll load up a Celsius and
yeah.
I'll taper this throughout the morning, and then I'll still have an espresso in the afternoon, but I can't go any later than like 3 or 4 p.m. 4 p.m. is absolute latest because then I will be in bed all night and I'll be like this and I need to go to sleep and I can't. So I feel like I have tape on my eyes and it's
I
just like I can't go to bed. But
I get it, and at the same time, I don't know what I have done to my body. Caffeine doesn't do anything to me. It's just I drink it for the habit or maybe a taste. But I can drink it at 9 p.m. and go to sleep 9:30. It'll be just
oh
fine.
wow.
I don't know what it is. I have no idea. I have so much Red Bull in my body and caffeine. So throughout my career of as an ethical hacker, that's what keeps me going or kept me going. And I at this point I just drink it for the taste, I think. I think.
You've built up an immunity. It's
Yeah, I
crazy.
know.
I wonder, and I'll tell you what the great thing about Craft that I love is that now in this role too, I've been able to hit different countries,
Yeah.
and the coffee in different countries is
Oh,
just it's amazing, right? So
absolutely.
I always try and sample it locally as well, but it's a
100%.
necessity.
And give us your recommendations as well. We'll put in the show notes.
Okay, definitely will do. Anything dark. I'm a dark roast guy.
Same here. That
Yeah.
I completely respect that. All right. Zero trust. So we started this podcast for two reasons. One, a lot of practitioners who are actually working for organizations, customers, trying to defend. So they're on the teamer side, unlike you and IJ. Um, they're saying that, hey, we hear this zero trust. What do I do with it? There is so much out there. Every vendor has their own definition of zero trust. There is, yes, official statement about zero trust and what it is as well. There's a guidance from DoD as well. There's a clear information from the forefathers who coined the term as well. But again, there's a lot of noise. So they said, hey, we need different diverse perspectives so we can understand what it is and how do I apply that in my day job. How do I actually go and put that into my framework, into my program? So this is where we talk about, we bring different guests and we talk about like, what does zero trust mean to you, Jay? What you have heard so far from your customers, from your own knowledge? What does zero trust mean to you?
When I think about zero trust, I can't help but think I'm an old school professional wrestling guy, and I'm sure you may heard and the audience may know of this guy Stone Cold Steve Austin. He used to go around and he used to be like DTA, don't trust anybody, right? And it just flashes me back to that because it's zero trust to me is the level of paranoia that I think as security practitioners we've tend to build up, rightfully so, because of everything that's happened over the numerous amount of years with attacks and they continue to happen. Um, it's the necessity of making sure that you explicitly verify the identity of everything in the environment and not just identities that you consider human identities, but it's different uh, service accounts, machine identities. It's really understanding that everything needs to be explicitly defined. Roles and access need to be explicitly defined, and you leave nothing to chance because if you leave nothing to chance, then nothing can happen. But if there's assumptions, then attackers will find it.
Absolutely. And again, that's something I completely align with and I believe in, because coming from the ethical hacking background, penetration testing background, that's what I thrive upon. Anything that either machine is trusting another machine, or a human is trusting a machine, or machine is trusting a human, I thrived upon that. That's what I that was my jackpot. And that's what we are preaching in the zero trust model, identity, and other pillars in it, with that. Let's just not trust anything. Let's keep verifying it. Let's make sure that every time you want to ask for something from the enterprise, data, access, let's make sure who you are, where you're coming from, and what are you doing. That's also very important. We ignored that fact for the longest time. As long as we have VPN, you get access to the whole world in my enterprise. Or maybe that's not enough anymore. I want to know exactly which system did you touch? Why did you touch it? Did you need it? So just that explicit access, once I make sure that you show me your badge, is not enough anymore. What's your take on that one, Jay?
No, I completely agree, and I think it's like I mentioned. This is why I say it's that state of paranoia where you're
Yeah,
just going to say, instead of just saying, "Oh, okay, VPN access, you're good to go," right? You still don't know, for example, okay, well, if I give you VPN access, you're working from home. Is it really you behind the keyboard, right? Or have you been compromised already, right?
yeah,
And we're seeing a lot of that really just within this just if you look up the statistics just with info stealer malware alone,
yeah,
and how that has really increased over time. Leveraging credentials alone, obviously everyone knows that's not enough, but even if you've used multi-factor authentication to authenticate a device, it's still not enough. I agree with you that I think we need to get a little bit more granular into what you're doing, why you're doing it, where and for how long. And unfortunately, while that is a good approach, it also creates a ton of work, and it's very challenging because you're now getting into a lot of intricacies and there's a lot of gray area. And when I say gray, it's not necessarily of the area of, oh, I might need it. It's more of like, I need access for a little bit and then I won't need it, but then all of a sudden I need it again. And like I mentioned, that requires someone to manually intervene or go in, change policies for a little bit. And it's so I agree with you. It's just it's a very big challenge for organizations because it involves many different people and many different processes.
and I also believe, I think zero trust framework and zero trust guidance, it actually helps business people to really realize what IT security, cyber security, what they're doing for them. I think it's the best way to actually take credit of the work, because sometimes a thankless job, and I get it. Um, but this framework actually kind of opened their eyes as well. If a board member is looking at it, they're reading this in plain English, that where are my attack surface, what I need to look at it, and what I should ask. This gives them a map of, hey, how do I mature my program? And I think we rightly said it last time in the show, where this is not something that you can achieve it overnight, or even it's not a project that there's an end date. There is no end date. Just know that for fact. When you're considering zero trust journey, there is no end date. So never start this as a project. It should be a project to kick you off the butt, I guess, but kick off the part where we're gonna adopt it, we're gonna start, and we're gonna do the heavy lifting. But it's continuous in your organization. Jay, when you're talking to your customers, any stories jumped out, or anything that you want to share with our listeners, that, hey, I heard this zero trust story and this was amazing, or I heard this zero trust and this was like, did not align with your beliefs, or did not align with what zero trust means?
Well, I would say I have stories, and it's just due to the nature of what I've been doing in the last 3.5 years working for Pantera. You mentioned something that I just want to co-sign because you said there's no ending, right? It's a journey and it's continuous. And you and I have had several conversations about this. I think we're cut from the same cloth where we are very big proponents of security validation. And the validation of the zero trust, I want to say, framework is really a critical component as well. So my stories have been where I've walked into organizations. Now, naturally, when we walk into organizations, we're looking to do that security validation. And it's always interesting to walk into organizations and to start having discussions where saying we have a zero trust initiative. I go, oh, great. Right. Because then I'm wondering, okay, well, what have you done so far, right? What type of access control or policies or processes have you set up? Because we're going to put that to the test, right? That's what we want to do. And there have been times where we've seen Pantera get completely stopped, right? So we're not able to run, or get around on the network or do lateral movement precisely because these policies have been set up. It's like, great, green flags. I mean, you can now, that's very powerful, right? Because now you can go back to the business and say, hey, look, this journey, all this effort that we've been putting into process, into place, and the blood, sweat, and tears, all of that, right? Which we know security is a lot of work, like we've been talking about. We actually have evidence to say, look, we are protected. And that confidence is almost priceless, because it's almost like if we've spent X amount of dollars on the program, whether that's investment in tools or personnel, whichever, we could say, look, if we've classified and said we don't want to be locked up or ransomed because we know that if certain assets are down for a certain amount of time, it would cost us this much. Well, we now know we're protected. So for me, the best stories are when we go in and we see the zero trust initiatives actually working. And there have also been times where, even though the initiatives have been set up and we've been stopped and we're validating, we still find some gaps. And that's also really critical, because we found them before, we being, the security professionals, Pantera, whichever, right? You found them before the adversaries have. And it's just making sure that every layer, there's no holes, right? There's no gaps. And then you can fill those gaps. So those are the stories that are really stand out to me. Whether it's, we found a machine that came on the network and it was communicating, blasting on identities, and it got around in certain area of the network, but it could only go so far because we put these processes in place. Great. It's very easy to change the small gap. Why have any gaps at all? And I've seen a lot of organizations really step up their posture. And by step up, meaning like, when we can't go in, we can't expose. It's a great story. It really instills confidence.
I agree 100%. And two things again, to those sentiments are: one, where doing what you're doing and putting a quantified way of explaining it is the best way to actually justify what you're doing, and also tells you what else needs to be done. If you've done it all, and then you feel that you have done your best and everything is all plugged in, which is never the case, I haven't seen it yet, then great. Maybe help business, maybe put another project. But one thing I will say, and Jay, you agree to it maybe, when we are working on zero trust journey, it's not just about the technical controls. It's not. There's a lot of controls you got to put on people, processes. So that's where I think I have seen in people, I would say, unsuccessful zero trust journeys, where they try to buy a blinky light with a stamp of zero trust, and talked about that during the last show, that some of the vendors are saying we are zero trust certified. What the heck does it even mean?
What does that mean? Yeah.
Right. So the customers, the organizations, they accidentally, mistakenly bought the zero trust certified, or with the false pretense that, hey, if you buy my product, you'll be zero trust completed. You'll be zero trust certified as well. I think that's wrong, obviously, but also I think this is where some of those vendors are also polluting the journey. They're polluting the mindset, and those mistakes are gonna make some security leaders jaded, that maybe zero trust is not for their organization, or they just don't know how to do it. It's not their fault, honestly.
I would say I it's very easy to get jaded in security.
Yeah.
In general, right? I mean, if you go on the cybersecurity subreddit, you'll see tons of, I'm burnt down, right? But I think it's important, instead of, we could blast vendors all we want. I think it's important to understand that, vendors do have a mission that they are trying to help. Sometimes the mission gets misguided when you say, or it's marketed that whatever we're talking about, whether it's zero trust or continuous threat exposure management, you could, whatever framework we're talking about.
Yeah.
anytime a vendor says we're your one-stop solution for
Sure.
this framework, red flag should go up, right? Because it's never that simple.
Yeah.
Not when you have complex environments, complex data, identities, all these processes. So I think as generally in the industry, we just need to understand that everything is going to be, like you said, a journey, but it's up to us being the individual organization, to understand what the path looks like, because the path for one industry vertical is going to be completely different than an industry vertical. And I think coming together as professionals to learn about what the paths actually are can actually enlighten to say, I didn't think about that, or I didn't think about it this way. Even though we have completely different business objectives, we can still learn from each other. I think that collaboration, this is why podcasts like this and generally talking about the challenges in the industry together as a whole is so, so important, because I don't think there's ever, the learning is also a journey.
When companies, organizations, customers are starting zero trust journey, there is always the overwhelming part, because okay, where do I start? It's a framework. It's not exactly okay, go turn this knob and you achieve 1 out of 99 controls. It's not that simple. We always talk about during the show that it's a journey, and read the framework, apply to what makes sense for your program, and also take the credit of good work you already done. But make sure your fundamentals, foundations are rock solid before you put anything advanced on top of it. We have seen those memes where there's a really nice fancy building just hanging on off a little piece of wood or something.
Yeah.
That's what it really means. And we want to continue reminding people that, hey, make sure that your top 3 CIS, or just in general, know your assets, know your attack surface, know, do some sort of little bit of threat modeling. And if you don't, use the platforms out there. You don't have to do this alone anymore. There are partners out there, such as Jay, who can sit down with you and say, okay, this is your organization. These are threats coming to this sort of organizations. If you're in healthcare, let's say, you could do that threat modeling and say, hey, let me test, let me validate what you have. They'll give you the roadmap already that you can factor into your zero trust journey. Jay, anything that you want to add to it?
Yeah, no, I agree. The way when you said foundations, right, it resonated with me, because we still see gaps in foundational things that I would consider foundational, like multi-factor authentication. I mean, look at what was going on with, what happened with Ticketmaster, Snowflake, and all of that. It's like, oh, multi-factor authentication, and whose responsibility is it? It's like, if you're following the level of paranoia, you should be doing it either way, right? It shouldn't matter whose responsibility it is. You have the option, you should enable it, right? That to me is foundational. I even tell people, like, on their emails, do you have multi-factor authentication, right? And people outside the industry go, what's that? I go, oh, please, like, turn it on, right? I would call it hygienic, right? You want to hopefully brush your teeth every day. There are certain things that hygienically, whether it's zero trust or other foundational aspects in security that you're always doing, I agree with you. Like understanding, like you said, understanding your assets, understanding what your critical assets are. And that's going to vary based on your business. So what is critical to your business? That's what you want to protect and work your way out from there. And that will then inherently grow to who's accessing these critical assets. Oh, the identities. What else is accessing it? More on the machine side or the application side. So I think focusing on, like you said, on the foundational things first before you even go purchasing blinking lights or whichever. There are many things you can do inherently just by having conversations with business owners, internal business owners, application owners, and understanding what's critical is where I completely agree. You should start.
Yeah, absolutely. So as we wrap up this podcast, I think I always start and end with this, that what do I take away from it? So if you've already started your journey of zero trust, great. Continue maturing on, evolving from there. Again, there is no end date to it. So it's going to be a journey. So make sure, accept that, adopt it, and evangelize it in your organization. If you have not started it, I would say actually go start with bare minimum reading the framework, reading the principles, and then sitting down with the business person. Don't start with IT, don't start with technical person. because they're going to try to solution architect it right away. They're going to get into it right away. My advice is sit down with the business person and say, hey, this is what a framework looks like. Now, what do you see our gaps are? Ask them. It'll give you insights that you had never known or would never come out during a conversation. Applying zero trust from an angle of business would give you that roadmap that you need to help business and ultimately really reduce the risk score for your organization. That's my advice. If you have not started it, that's one piece of advice I can give you. Take the framework, sit down with the business person, spend an hour or two, just hash it out. Don't start with IT. You can come back to IT and then solution architect it, but start with the business person and just hear them out. That's my advice. Jay, what do you have to say about it?
1,000%. I couldn't agree with you more. I think I said it a little bit earlier, right? You need to have an understanding of the business. Security is often seen as a hindrance, but when you sit down with the business and you have these conversations and you make it more about the business and enabling the business, whatever the business mission is, right? If you're in retail, you're going to be selling things, right? It's retail. If you're in healthcare, it might be saving lives. Manufacturing, you're creating things. Understand what the mission of the business is and make security about protecting that mission, because ultimately that's what you're doing. You're protecting the availability, confidentiality, integrity of the information that's going to enable the business. And in doing so, you can allow or change the view of security and say, okay, this is actually, as much as things may introduce new processes, it actually is going to protect and enable me. So you said it so well. I don't think I could have articulated it any better of where you can and should start. And I would encourage everybody listening to do exactly that.
All right. Well, Jay, thank you very much for being with us today and talking about Zero Trust journey and your thoughts around it. For our listeners, if you have any questions for us, feel free to reach out to us. And shout out to Jay and the team again for helping us out always. Thank you.
Thank you.